Hey guys, welcome to our channel. My name's Amber, I'm a mom of 10 kids and we live in New York City. A lot of times people ask us, why do you live in New York City? So I'm going to try and answer that question right now. So we used to live in San Diego and we actually had 9 children in San Diego before we moved here. We had a little house that we had purchased, thankfully, and it was only 1,000 square feet, so we're used to living small. And we always wanted to add on to it, but we never got around to it. So, you know, that's kind of our story as far as San Diego goes. But one thing about San Diego was we just felt like we had reached the cap of what the kids could do with their classical music in San Diego. They were accomplished musicians and they had all studied violin or cello or viola. Well, basically violin or cello since they were really little, and they were getting better and better. And we kind of like maxed out what we could do in San Diego. And so we kind of were looking for greener pastures. At the same time, we had this friendship we were developing with a family up in the Bay Area named the Brashears. And they were really inspiring to us. I mean, they always won competitions and they're just such a neat family. If you look them up, I think they're called, they keep changing their name, I think they're called the Brashears Quartet right now. It used to be Stars Aligned Siblings, and then before that it was Little Stars String Trio, because there's, you know, as their group grew, they have 8 kids too, so they have like a big family too. But they were always so inspiring to us, and we saw them, they were up in the Bay Area, they started going to the San Francisco Conservatory of Music, and so we didn't think much of it. They reached out to us on YouTube, and they said, hey, you guys are playing the double concerto, we also play the double concerto, like that's cool, like maybe we should meet sometime. And I kind of like, I don't know, I wasn't super like, oh yeah, let's do that, but I was also like, that's kind of cool, like these people actually want to talk to us and they're so good, like how cool is that? Anyway, so that was part of our, like, the thing that planted our seed that maybe San Francisco is, you know, greener pastures than San Diego. We did have a really good violin teacher in San Diego. We had intermittent cello teachers that were kind of in and out of our lives, and then they also had the youth symphony in San Diego, so it wasn't like it was a desert. But coming up we saw a desert, and this is, let me explain. So we also had another family that was actually in San Diego, and this is the Bonnell family, and they just wowed our socks off. We absolutely, like, wow, they're so amazing. They were quite a bit older than our kids, and they did a lot of performing at our church, and just they really wowed us. And the group kind of ended up splitting up because some of the kids got married and so forth, which is totally normal, like that's like what happens in life, right? But one of the siblings came over and she kind of told us the story of her kind of college experience. And they went to a Baptist college, and in the Baptist college, like, she would go to the lesson and she'd be like, yeah, I want to learn like Tchaikovsky. But she got there and the teacher always had her kind of work on old pieces she already knew. And then it kind of came to her understanding that the teacher didn't even know how to teach her the Tchaikovsky, potentially. At least this is what I remember from the conversation. Don't quote me if I'm wrong, but something like that. And so I was like, wow, like, that's a bummer, you know? Like, she's really accomplished. She goes to a college, and the teacher's, doorbell's ringing. Teacher's like, she maybe doesn't even have the prowess to be able to teach a more complicated violin piece. That was a Baptist college in, I think, the Los Angeles area. Then they went down to San Diego State, and while there was a good quartet in residence there, sometimes the person that she'd go to lessons with wouldn't show up for like 45 minutes into the lesson. And I'm hearing these stories and I'm like, wow, like, just San Diego, I feel like there's a cap. I feel like we need to kind of branch out. No, this is what normal people do. What normal musician kids do is they get really good in whatever city they're in, and then they go off to college into the areas where colleges have music, if they want to study music. But with us, like, we just don't have the financial prowess, we didn't then, and we don't now, to just send kids off into different cities, especially since we have a lot of kids. So I was like, okay, so we need to think this through. We need to think about what we're going to do in the future, because as the kids were growing up, I thought any major city is going to have a good classical music program at the college level. Period. I thought that's all we could think of. I wouldn't think anything else would be the case. That may have been the case in like 1950. In 2020, that's changed a lot. Classical music does not hold the place in people's hearts and minds that it used to. So, you know, understandably, even in grade school, there used to be violins, and, you know, like, they used to have orchestras in like elementary schools and like middle schools and high schools. I remember seeing violins in the locker when I went to school in Chicago in the 80s, and I was like, wow, like, what are these violins doing here? Or I also saw violins in the lockers at my middle school in Alameda, which is in the Bay Area. My dad was in the military, so he moved all the way around. So that was just something that was like, you could expect that everywhere you went. Nowadays, it's more of a kind of a niche thing. Like, that's not available everywhere. So one thing led to another, and we were like, okay, what do we do? So we left. Eventually, we decided we're gonna leave San Diego. But first, we auditioned for the San Francisco Conservatory of Music to make sure we had a reason to leave, and we auditioned for the pre-college program because none of our kids were quite old enough for college yet. So they auditioned for the pre-college program, and I believe this was 2019. Little did we know. So let me just tell you our plan. Okay, so our plan was, we're going to go to the Bay Area, and we're going to sell our house in San Diego, and we did sell our house in San Diego, but our idea was we're going to take the equity from our house, and we're going to buy another house, and we're going to flip that house, and basically every 2 years, you don't have to pay taxes. If you buy a house, you wait 2 years and sell it, you don't have to pay taxes on it, which can be really crippling, you know. So I was like, okay, so we'll basically just do this like 2-year flip, you know, because Mark had shown himself to be very good at remodeling. I mean, he remodeled our house and made it much nicer before we sold it. But the problem is that, so he worked at the time for a place called Integrated Sign, and it was a place that he's a graphic artist, graphic designer by trade. But he's also really good at 3D things, spatial reasoning and so forth. And so he was at Integrated Sign, and he was like, okay, like, can I work remotely? You know, can I do stuff like online? He did programming and so forth for a router table that cut out signs for different businesses. He's like, can I do this online? And they said no. So we're like, okay. So that's when we decided, you know, let's just try and get the house flipping thing for income, and just kind of like, you know, fake it till we make it financially until then. But into 2019, early 2020 was when the pandemic and all its craziness hit, and so we could not get a loan. We were the kind of loan we needed after the Dodd-Frank Act was because they no longer let you just like state your income or state, you know, what's going on. We had to, we would have had to have a bank statement loan, and they stopped issuing bank statement loans right when we needed one, like to the like week almost. So we sold our house, and we couldn't buy another house. We were like, okay, we could have gotten a hard money loan, which now this doesn't sound so bad, but that's like 10% interest, and then you have to sell it within a year and give them all their money, and just crazy stuff. Like, yeah, it's like you sign your name in blood on those, right? So that just was not an option. We actually had considered doing that, and we actually signed up for a hard money loan for one of the houses that we put a bid on, but we didn't end up getting at the bid because somebody else outbid us. And that was kind of what was happening. It was weird. There was this pandemic shutdown where everyone was like tightening lending and like so forth, but at the same time the housing market was like going up. I think because people were like, if I have to stay home, you know, I want my home to be awesome. And so people were like buying houses and stuff. So that was kind of like dream crusher number one. So we go up to the Bay Area anyway. I mean, our kids are already signed up for SFCM were like, I don't know what we're gonna do. Around that time, so basically no one was hiring, so Mark was able to get unemployment because with everything that was going on with the pandemic, they allowed him to have unemployment. Like, we gave him all our information, like, yeah, you qualify for unemployment, and they also did that like bonus unemployment thing, so that kind of helped us stay a little bit above water. We were living in a trailer because we had a little trailer, and we went up to the Bay Area. We stayed in a trailer park in South San Francisco. It wasn't a bad situation. I mean, I know it's not ideal living in a trailer with, at the time, 11 people. We didn't have Moses yet, but it worked. I mean, we were sheltered, sheltered from the rain, from the cold. We had AC, we had heat, we had all these things. So we had every intention of staying in the trailer, and we were still trying to like do the hard money loan thing, whatever we needed to do to get into a house. We were super focused on getting a house because that was like our means to income and so forth. And so that never worked out. We were always outbid, and at the same time, the trailer park people were getting tired of us. Our kids had to practice, and one of the places there was a graveyard in South San Francisco next to the trailer park, and so they would practice sometimes in the graveyard. There's crypts and so forth, and sometimes they would practice in the crypts. Thankfully, we don't watch horror movies, so the kids weren't scared. There's like kind of weird structures. South San Francisco is a really interesting place, so there's these weird places for the kids to practice that at least were sheltered from the rain. Also the laundry room at the trailer park. But I think we were annoying, and sometimes we practiced next to the trailer, but there was a lady behind us that had no tolerance for noise, and so she was like, oh, you know, like, you're making too much noise, like, so anyway, so we basically did not practice next to the trailer much at all, just because we didn't want to. And sometimes the little kids could fit practicing inside the trailer, but it's like an Airstream. It's not like a, you know, it doesn't have those slides that you can pull out to make more width, so we were definitely jamming tight in there, and we were just looking for a place. And we basically gave up on renting, and we decided, or we basically gave up on owning, and we decided, okay, let's look for a place to rent. So the Bay Area is, you know, it's known for tech. There's a lot of tech employees, and it's, you know, a lot of the people that are renting there, or the normal clientele is like, you know, a husband, wife, couple kids, maybe. Usually not. Usually it's like a single guy and a dog, or a single woman and like maybe a cat. Like, those are the normal people that rent in the Bay Area. So then comes us, you know, and we're like, we've got 9 kids, you know. And honestly, there came a point where I stopped volunteering that information because they're technically not supposed to ask. If they asked, I told them. But if they didn't ask, I was like, you know, don't ask, don't tell. It's legally, like, according to, if you look at the HUD rules or whatever, they're not even supposed to ask you. It's like asking, are you like Muslim or whatever. Now, there is, of course, occupancy rules, so any place that we would look for, I always made sure that we were legally okay there as far as our, the square feet, bedrooms, family size, and so forth, before I even approached a place. It's not like I was like, you know, trying to find some like studio apartment for all of us, which, I mean, you've heard of that stuff, like, particularly in like places like New York, where there's like, you know, a family of immigrants that just like, okay, we can afford this studio, you know, and then they've got their family, and then like Uncle George or whoever comes in, and then like Grandma Frederica, and like all these different people show up, and they you know, they all like just make it work. Like, that's kind of the old story of like immigrants. And so I you know, that people have made situations like that work. Definitely not ideal. Like, probably the most famous person that I've heard that story of is Gary Vaynerchuk. Like, he and his family, and I think extended family, they immigrated from the Soviet Union, and they lived in like a studio apartment in Queens, you know. So like, not ideal, but people have risen above that. So I'm not saying, but what I'm saying is we were not looking for that sort of an arrangement. Like, I was definitely looking for like legal enough space, you know, but it was hard, you know. It was hard to find a place. So but the rents were going down because, so here's the thing. Okay, so the rents were going down in San Francisco proper, but they were going up in the surrounding areas. So in the suburbs, like places like Richmond or San Pablo, or Berkeley, the rates were skyrocketing because people, if they were going to be stuck at home, wanted a backyard. They wanted kind of the things that the suburbs provided. But San Francisco provided none of those things, right? And so people were leaving San Francisco and going to the other places in the Bay Area to rent. So we decided to eventually look at San Francisco proper, because so many people had hung up the phone on us, like, oh, you have 9 kids, 9, What happened was, one lady, I called her and I was like, I think it was like a 3-bedroom. It was pretty big, I mean, like, we always had a 3-bedroom house. Like, we just had a boys' room, a girls' room, and then, like, mommy and daddy room, and we always made stuff like that work. And there was a garage, there was a yard. It wasn't a bad place. It was more square feet than we had in, like, San Diego, which was 1,000 square feet. So anyway, so I called this lady about this apartment, and she was like, okay, so how many kids do you have? And I was like, 9. But she was Asian, I could tell, so she had an accent, and she couldn't really understand me perfectly well. And so she's like, oh, 9? I think you say, no, she said 1? I think you say 9. That's funny. I was like, no, I actually said 9. She's like, oh, 9? Oh, too many. She hangs up. So I was like, okay. So I could tell that housing security was going to be a problem. But we had already committed. We had already moved away from San Diego. We had already, we jumped off the cliff, and we were like, having to learn to fly on the way down. So we found a place in San Francisco that they didn't ask. They didn't ask if we had kids. I think they were just desperate to get somebody in there, and they didn't, or maybe they knew the rules, or that you're not supposed to ask, or whatever. So they didn't ask, and I didn't volunteer. So I was like, we just need a place to go, because at the same time, the trailer park was getting annoyed. We were there for 2 months. We were at the trailer park for 2 months, and they wanted us out, and in fact they evicted us at the end. But just as they evicted us, this other place in San Francisco had opened up its doors to us, and so it was like, okay, this is looking like an emergency, because what happened was the kids were in the laundry room, and I think Naomi had just helped Enoch with his violin, and as a reward she put Enoch in the violin. Oh no, she put Enoch in the laundry cart and pushed him around the laundry room, and he thought that was great. Anyway, I guess there's a sign posted somewhere in the laundry room that you're not allowed to, put anybody in the carts. And so the lady, she emailed us. She's like, okay, well, you broke this term of agreement, and so you're getting evicted from the trailer park. And so I'm like, okay, we're getting evicted from the trailer park. That's bad. Okay, so anyway, but at the same time, there was this other apartment in San Francisco that opened up that didn't ask us a bazillion questions, and so we were like, okay, great, let's just take it. So we took it. The person that showed it to us said it was really soundproof. It was not really soundproof. Okay, so it was an old Victorian house. We were in the middle floor, and above us and below us were people that were working from home because it was a pandemic. So ideally, what could have happened if it was not the pandemic is we could have practiced during the day while the people on the top and bottom were at work, and then we wouldn't have probably bothered anybody. Problem is that the people on the top and bottom were not at work. They were working from home, and so us practicing our instruments and so forth bothered them. So we didn't quite know what to do. It turned out that it sounded like, I don't think it was the property management, it was there's this lady that worked for the property management, and she was telling the downstairs, so rent in San Francisco, they have some pretty robust rent control where they can't just kick you out for any reason, especially during the pandemic, right? And so I feel like what was going on, because obviously nobody told me this straight up because they'd get in trouble for it, but I feel like what was happening was that they were trying to build a case that we were a nuisance because, there was no real legal reason for us to not be there. So they were trying to come up with a way to evict us that they could dream up, So they're like, okay, so what they had the upstairs neighbors do, it's kind of frustrating the upstairs neighbors went along with it, but whatever, I understand, was record us. And the landlord told the upstairs neighbors, if you have any noise complaints, don't tell the neighbors downstairs, which was us, make sure you just bring it to the property management. So she actually had them record us, and without our knowledge, you know, I guess like through the walls or something. There was one place, because it used to be all one house, and so there was one place in the stairwell area between the, like, it was covered over by a wall, but you could hear, I could hear everything, like conversations our upstairs neighbors were having, so of course they could hear us too, right? It was not soundproofed at all. It was just kind of slapped together, you know, like, okay, let's take one house and turn it into 3 different apartments so you can rent it out for as much as possible type of thing, you know? But so anyway, so she had the neighbors recording us, and then the landlord was like, oh, well, you know, I've heard there's all this noise coming from your apartment and this and that, and so this isn't working out. And, you know, I could tell that was like prerequisite to, we're going to take you to court and evict you. So we were like, okay. And so what we did was we circumvented the landlord, and we went up and talked to the neighbors, and we're like, why aren't you coming to us? Like, why haven't you said anything? And they're like, this is how we found this out. They were like, you know, the landlord told us not to talk to you. The landlord told us just to document all the times that we were being loud and just tell the landlord that directly. And the thing that was kind of shady about that was that in the lease, it actually said if you have a noise complaint about your neighbor, you need to talk to your neighbor directly before you contact the property management. So property management was basically having the upstairs neighbors do something that was against the lease of what they were supposed to do. So it was so shady, you know. Anyway, so we were like, what I felt like was that I needed to play chess. Because the rent control in San Francisco is really robust, maybe even more, probably the most robust rent control, which is basically like you can't evict somebody without a very specific reason, and you have to renew that lease. You know, if there's not a very specific reason to not renew that lease, you have to renew that lease. Like, so your lease automatically renews. They can't kick you out. So it was like we were good there as long as they couldn't get us out on a nuisance complaint. And so what I did was I actually talked to HUD, and I was like, okay, we've got this problem. One of the things they said at first was like, oh, maybe we'll just charge you extra for water or whatever, which I was totally fine with. I'm like, you know, that's fine. You can charge extra for water, but that's, I guess, illegal according to HUD. I don't know why. I don't know. You know, HUD's got rules. But so I went to HUD and I was like, okay, I'm concerned about our ability to stay here. They're kind of doing this sneaky thing behind our backs. And I feel like they're trying to pressure us to get out. And I don't feel like that's fair because we're trying to do everything we can. We want to communicate with the neighbors, but the landlord was forbidding us from communicating with the neighbors. Anyway, it was a mess. So what I did was I went to HUD, and HUD gave us, you can go to court and sue and this and that. I was like, I don't want to sue. I just want a place where our family's not going to get kicked out, where we can just live and sleep and, you know, just eat and just be a family, like not homeless, right? So HUD basically wrote out an agreement so we could just be safe there. So after that, what happened after that? Sorry, I'm trying to remember. So we were there and we were kind of safe. And then, there's 2 things going on at the same time. So, you know, thankfully Mark was still qualifying for unemployment. That was extended because of the pandemic. But then I was kind of like, well, we need to think about something we're going to do after that. And so in addition to the where are we going to live stress and like trying not to get kicked out of the apartment, the other stress was, okay, what is Mark going to do for employment? So obviously we still had unemployment because the pandemic extended that, but I was kind of like, okay, well, the house thing didn't work out. And we actually had to spend through equity, you know. We tried to spend as little as possible. We were super frugal, but I mean, we just, to survive, we had to spend through some equity of the house. And we're just like, nail biter, what are we gonna do? And I was suggesting that since Mark was a graphic designer by trade, that he should try and do some graphic design. And at first he was kind of resistant, but then he did make some effort at it. He hasn't really been able to drum up much business, unfortunately. And I guess he just told me recently that he was kind of depressed during that time, just because it's like, you know, it was a very depressing time, I think, for a lot of people, and he didn't really have a lot of motivation, and he, what ended up happening so that we could stay in the apartment was, to move this, so we could stay in the apartment. The kids ended up practicing at the park because we did not want to annoy the neighbors. They were practicing at Golden Gate Park. They practiced in the parking garage. They would go there every morning and practice in the parking garage. And so, you know, that was a lot of, you know, Mark's morning was kind of spent doing that. And he tried to do some graphic design while they were at the park because he was basically watching them. I mean, it's not like a place where you can just like leave your kids, particularly young kids. Older, like Josiah, he's a big boy, he can fend for himself. But like Naomi and Noah, like Mark had to be definitely around. So it was actually a pretty chill place. I think a lot of people think of San Francisco as this like, you know, hellhole. It's not so bad. I mean, there's actually really nice people there. So anyway, so here's another thing too, is while the kids were practicing in the parking garage, there were people that actually donated to their music. So there's people that, like, we weren't busking or anything. They were just practicing. It wasn't like, you know, when you practice, it's not pretty, like scales and all this ugly stuff. But people gave them money, like, and they were able to use it to help them buy nicer instruments and so forth. So, I mean, it wasn't like, I felt like God, you know, was taking care of us. Plus also to help, because even though we had a scholarship from SFCM, it didn't cover everything, you know, and plus when we had private lessons that, you know, during the time we didn't have in-session SFCM lessons, private lessons were like $200. So it was like, yeah, that was a lot of money, and there was a number of kids that were having to pay $200 a lesson for. Plus, people needed upgraded instruments. Pearl's teacher was not satisfied with her viola or her bow, and you know, so that was like thousands and thousands of dollars. So we did busking at the time too, and that helped, you know, particularly with the music expenses that were pretty big. And also there was like, during the pandemic, there were like these stimulus checks the government like randomly sent out, and that, I mean, that helped too. I'm like not gonna look a gift horse in the mouth. Of course, that's also why there's such high inflation, is because it wasn't just us that they sent those checks to. They sent them to everybody's. But I mean, it definitely kept us afloat during a rocky time for us. I mean, ours, I know a lot of people had rocky times. Ours was particularly rocky, like trying to stay housed and stuff. It was like, ah. So anyway, in San Francisco, the kids really flourished. They learned so much at SFCM. So they went to the pre-college program, and then my son also auditioned for the college program. And they really flourished there. And Josiah really enjoyed the college program. At the pre-college program, Pearl's viola teacher was like, I think you need to kind of look for brighter horizons. Before Pearl's viola teacher told her this, I was like, we're just going to stay in San Francisco. The kids have a conservatory to go to. We're good. But, you know, Pearl's viola teacher was like, no, you need something better. You need something better. And so he encouraged her to audition different places. One of them was NEC. One of them was Curtis. One of them was Juilliard. So I was like, oh my goodness, how are we going to do this? Like, we did not have the money to have Pearl be at Juilliard. And you know, other kids be at SFCM, and we didn't have the money to have kids in different places. So we're like, well, okay, maybe the whole family can move, so that you know, as the various kids grow older, there's just so much, there's more happening in New York than San Francisco as far as classical music goes. And so we're like, well, if we kind of plan a move to New York City, then I mean, that's kind of the pièce de résistance, the tip of the classical music that America offers. I mean, the only thing I could think of is like Paris or something, you know, like something crazy like that. Like, as far as America goes, New York City is the crème de la crème. Now, you know, there's people that say like, oh, Curtis is better, or, you know, NEC is better, or, you know, Michigan, or there's a lot of places that are like, you know, better for this or better for that. But as a whole, you know, if you want to go to the best classical music buffet, New York City is the best, like, buffet, you know. So we're like, okay, so Pearl auditioned for Juilliard. Josiah also auditioned for Juilliard, but he also auditioned for Manhattan School of Music. Elijah, Naomi, Noah, Anna, and Chloe all auditioned for Juilliard pre-college. Now, SFCM pre-college and Juilliard pre-college are similar. Some people ask, like, what is pre-college? It's like kind of like a one-stop music shop. So they do music theory. They do chamber music. They do composition. Sometimes you have like an elective of sorts. They do an orchestra. So and then there also is a community. Like, our kids are homeschooled, and I love for the kids to have a community that they get to be a part of that's, you know, kind of like-minded and so forth. And of course we have church friends and so forth, but, you know, just have a place where, you know, the kids are able to be like, you know, like, hey, yeah, we're all music nerds here. Like, that's just something that kind of builds you up. I know, like, for our kids, one of the best things that we had in San Diego was a Suzuki Strings group class. And they would go to the group class back in San Diego, and it helped them, like, be motivated to practice, and it just gave them motivation. And a lot of times as a kid, you just need motivation. So that was something that was really good for them. Anyway, so Juilliard Pre-College was similar to San Francisco Conservatory of Music Pre-College, so, but it's more choosy. So so Noah and Naomi did get accepted. Elijah, Anna, and Chloe did not get accepted. This year we auditioned again, and Elijah, Anna, and Chloe did get accepted to the in-person audition. So I'm just praying they can be accepted there. But so anyway, so that's what brought us to New York. As far as, you know, how we're here, how we're affording it, I mean, we are definitely, okay, so this is another thing, okay? This is like, back up. So spring of 2022, a little bit before that, there was a media company, and they were like, hey, you know, we'd like to, I can't say what the media company was because I signed like an NDA or whatever, so I can't say what it was. But so they were like, hey, we're interested in doing a show of your family. Like, you look at the plethora of shows they do, and they're like legitimate shows. It's not like they're like crazy people or anything. So they're like, yeah, we want to do a show of your family. And I was like, okay, that could help. I mean, because like there's financial, you know, if it works out, you know, having them do a show, like, that's potentially pays for rent in New York City, right? So I was like, okay, so we had some meetings, and quite a few meetings actually, and back and forth with emails, and, you know, they wanted to know information and so forth. But I think there were a couple of things happening. First of all, I think they were kind of like thinking like we were this kind of Amish-esque family, and we were in San Francisco, which was like, that's weird, you know? But we weren't going to stay in San Francisco. We were planning on moving to New York. Also, the other thing is we're kind of not like a weird religion. We're just basically normal Christians. I do believe in dressing modestly, because I feel like, you know, our girls don't need to be like sex objects. You know, I want them just to be free. I don't want them to be all like, you know, hemmed in by that. I want people to see them for who they are, and that's you know, some people may call that religious, but there's a lot of people that think that don't necessarily have a religious backing. I just think it's like, you know, kind of a little common sense, but maybe not for everyone. But anyway, so yeah, we're not weird. We're not like we're not Amish. We're not, you know, anything really that interesting. And so I think that was part of what was happening. The other thing I think that was happening, and why the show didn't work, so the show ended up not working out. We didn't find that out until after we moved to New York. But the other thing, the reason why the show didn't work out, I think, was because in spring of 2022 was when a lot of the streaming platforms, which is who they would have sold the show to, they lost subscribers for the first time ever, like Netflix and Hulu and all these places. They had really gained a lot of subscribers during the pandemic because people were like, what are we going to do? Let's just sit around and watch Netflix, right? But after the pandemic, people a lot of times were like, okay, we don't have a lot of money left, so they were dropping their subscriptions and so forth. And so these network companies or these streaming companies that were kind of really interested in buying shows were no longer interested in buying shows. So like, you know, a show that may or may not sell, it's a family that's in New York, they're not that weird, they're just a little weird, like, I know, I think there was kind of like, that's not going to be the next Bridgerton, so, you know, it's not going to be the next, what is that, Honey Boo Boo? Yeah, it's not going to be that. So anyway, so they were like, yeah, it's not going to work out, so they ended up canceling that. So we signed all these contracts and so forth, and we ended up canceling the contract. And so then it's back, okay, what are we gonna do financially? Like, you know, we still had some savings, and so we're just kind of like quietly kind of eating through that carefully. I mean, we're on a budget, you know, we're always trying to be careful. We eat bean burritos more than we eat anything else because that's the cheapest food. But still, you know, and then of course the kids busking and so forth, that covers the music expenses. They did get some, Pearl got an amazing scholarship that covers everything. Josiah's scholarships, that's okay, but it was still thousands of dollars to pay for his schooling, and then, because he got accepted to Manhattan School of Music, even though he didn't get accepted to Juilliard, and then the kids that didn't get accepted to pre-college Juilliard, now the pre-college Juilliard kids did get some scholarship. The kids did get a pre-college scholarship, but there's still some money to pay beyond that scholarship, pre-college Juilliard scholarship. So that's an expense. But our biggest expense right now is actually the kids that did not get a scholarship, did not get into college, and we have to pay for lessons. A lot of the lessons range from $100 to $150 a week. And then we also have piano lessons. Those are $150 a week for like 5 of our kids. So that's a good deal. But the other ones are like $150 a week per kid. Back in the Bay Area, it was $200 a week. So I'm not gonna lie, I'm super grateful for the fact that it's $50 cheaper, but that's still a lot of money. So anyway, so when we're out busking, people are pretty generous, and I'm super grateful for that, because it definitely does help with the cost of that. But you know, as far as like our living expenses, this and that, we're kind of like, okay, we're having to pay savings down and stuff. That's scary, because that's obviously finite. But right around this time that the streaming or the media company it's like, oh no, sorry, I have to cancel your contract. Then a management company contacted us, and they're a management company that manages, like, I really like the Doherty Dozen, so if they manage Doherty Dozen, like, so when they were like, hey, you're interested in management, I was like, yeah. I mean, the thing about management is you do pay them 25%, but also like brand deals, you negotiate that, which is good, because you know, you can really get creamed on those brand deals, so that's good. So we have done, so basically, so once the whole show thing was like, okay, that's not gonna work out, what we decided was like, okay, we can make like our own show, right? I mean, with YouTube and so forth, there's people that make a full-time living off of that stuff. The thing is that our YouTube channel hasn't gone terribly well. We have gotten some brand deals and so forth for like Instagram and TikTok, which I'm super grateful for. Like, we did a brand deal with Nerf, and there's like some, you know, other like health and beauty things that are kind of coming down the pike, so that's exciting. And then we also got paid from the platform to make content. Recently, I signed up for the TikTok Creator Fund Beta program, and like, if a video goes well, I can get paid like $1,000 for like a 3-minute video, which is like amazing, even though it sounds like, oh, that's such a good deal. Making a 3-minute video is actually really hard, that people actually watch that much of it, because you have to edit like bloop, 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 tiny little edits, tiny little slices, you know, because like when you're dealing, particularly with TikTok, it's just this scroll, like, ah, it's boring, scroll, 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 and you only get paid for how much people watch your video. So recently I had a video go well, and we ended up getting paid for like $1,000, and so some other videos also did well. So I'm like, well, if I can get paid enough thousands of dollars, that's rent, right? So rent is quite expensive here. So anyway, that's where we're at. Mark is still kind of pursuing graphic design, but part of the way I'm able to do a lot of the social media stuff, which is like hours and hours of editing, is that he helps with the meals, and he helps with the cleaning and so forth. The kids help, and of course I do some stuff too. Like, we're all like kind of a team, but he's real help in that, and so it frees me up to do the things I need to do. And then he also does graphic design for our family's business, and then he's also, you know, I think trying to kind of put his name out there to try and get clients too. I mean, obviously that's always been a dream of his. But anyway, so that's where we're at, and so we're not homeless yet. Somehow the people that rented us this house, they actually liked us, and we just told them like, okay, this is what we're about, this is what we're doing, and they gave us a chance, and I'm super grateful for it. The reason that they told me that they chose us over other people, applicants for the apartment, was because the owner, when he was a kid, I think it was in Portugal, you know, they were discriminated against, and so I think he had 8 siblings, or he was one of 8, and they weren't able to get an apartment. They had like a 1-bedroom apartment, and they weren't able to move to anywhere bigger because no one wanted them, because they were a big family. And that's amazing to me. Like, I'm like, wow, it's not just San Francisco, it's Portugal too. Okay, I'm glad to know it's not just us. But you know, it's like, okay, like, and so anyway, so he was like, you know what, we're going to give you a chance. And so that's why we have a place to live. We weren't sure what we're gonna do. I mean, this has been like risky. We have no idea what we're doing, and we had kind of a plan when we first left San Diego. Now our plan is praying and working as hard as we can. And I'm definitely pushing the social media thing more, especially on TikTok. And of course, we're talking about banning TikTok. And I'm like, don't ban TikTok. Finally, I'm like seeing some viable, like, wow, I can actually work out, But anyway, God knows. I have to trust him. He's helped us this far. And we've been warm and we've been fed and clothed. And I'm grateful for every day. And the younger kids are auditioning for Juilliard pre-college coming up in May. Pearl is doing really well at Juilliard in college. Josiah's doing really well at Manhattan School of Music. Now, not all of our kids are going to be like, oh, are all your kids going to be musicians? No, I don't think all of our kids are going to be musicians. Josiah, I think, wants to go to law school. You can do whatever you want for undergraduate before law school. So I think he's actually going to go to law school after, if he can, he's going to apply after Manhattan School of Music. So, he could probably do law that has to do with music. So you can do performance law, or there's a lot of different, like copyright laws, all these different, there's a lot of laws that apply to music. So it's not like he's going to be totally off, what he learned. But so that's his plan. Pearl, I think, does want to be a musician down the line. I mean, so many of our kids have varied abilities, like I feel like Noah would be so good at building bridges. I mean, he's always building stuff with his Legos. I feel like Elijah could be the president of the United States. He's really good at like bossing people around. Naomi is really good at composition. I feel like she could be a film composer. Pearl, the other thing she really loves doing is sewing. She loves to sew. She's so good at it. So I don't feel like, our kids are hemmed in, like they have to be musicians, but so far all of them have wanted to continue on into a conservatory. But here's the other thing about New York City. If by the grace of God we can continue to live here, is that New York City has, like, it's a hub for so many things. Like my husband was looking up graphic design. I guess there's like the biggest graphic design firm or whatever in the entire country, or maybe in the world, is based in New York City. If the kids want to do fashion design, that's in New York City. If the kids want to do film, obviously it's not Hollywood film, but like be like NYU film, like theater or engineering. I mean, Columbia is like, we could probably throw a rock really hard, and well, maybe not, but Columbia is just a walk away from our house. And I mean, Columbia's got everything. They've got law, they've got engineering, they've got math, they've got education, they've got, like, you name it, Columbia's got it. Between Columbia, NYU, Juilliard, Manhattan School of Music, and then there's also a really good community college here that is really well funded. And so it's just like there's so much here, and we don't have to pay rent for 10 kids in 10 different cities. We can just all live together until obviously they get married. Like, we're not freakazoids or anything. We're not like, you have to be part of, no, like once they get married, once they're ready to go up. I mean if the kids wanted to, Pearl has a dorm at Juilliard, and sometimes she stays at Juilliard, but sometimes she comes here. I mean, home is home. A dorm is fun, but home is home. And I will say for sure that she does like the food here better, especially since Daddy's cooking it recently. I'm not as good at cooking, sorry, not gonna lie. I'm not gonna pretend. But anyway, so thank you if you've made it this far for my rambling, blah, blah, blah. Thank you, and I'll keep you updated on what's going on.